Can companies work democratically? Do companies function even without hierarchy? A lot of people ask me that, and let's examine the main arguments that some people think are against democracy in companies. A lot of people say communism showed that it doesn't work. In communism, there was no private property, and that's why it didn't work. But the fact is that in Stalinist communism, companies were not democratic at all. The workers didn't have any say. The companies were strictly hierarchical, and that was part of the problem why they didn't work. People were not motivated to work for a company that they did not own at all. So this was quite the opposite of democracy. The other argument against democracy in companies is that people say, well, you need someone to tell you what to do. And if there's no one who tells you what to do, then people just don't know what to do, and it's completely chaotic and everything. So first of all, a lot of bosses don't do that. There are some bosses, some leaders within companies who can lead very well, but there are also really bad leaders. Some surveys say that most employees are actually not satisfied with the leadership in their company at all, even though it is a hierarchical company. So only because there is a boss, it doesn't mean that there is good leadership or guidance. What people need, especially if they're new in a company, is good guidance. Someone who tells them how things work, who explains things and shows them how to work and how things work. So obviously in worker cooperatives, which are organized in a democratical way, you also need someone who guides people. In hierarchical companies, leadership is mixed up. There are different tasks that are being mixed up. So for example, if there's someone who's professionally very, very good, very qualified, let's say the best programmer or the best chemist in the company, then the person is getting promoted and now has the role or the task to guide people. But only because I'm technically very good. It doesn't mean that I'm good in guiding people. Plus, a lot of promotions also mean that they have the power to make economic decisions. But only because I'm a good programmer, it doesn't mean that I'm good in taking economic decisions or in guiding people when they have maybe problems, when they're not motivated, when they feel that they're being bullied within the group. So these are completely different qualifications. And in a lot of hierarchical companies, these leadership tasks are mixed up. In cooperatives, you can separate them into different roles. You can say, hey, some people care about the economic analysis of the company and maybe prepare economic decisions. Someone else can say, hey, I want to take care of the people and make sure that everyone feels comfortable. And those people who are really into the technical stuff, like the best programmers or the best chemists, they can specialize on the things that they're good at. The other thing is that in cooperatives, you can use the group intelligence, the group creativity, the swarm intelligence. Whereas in hierarchical companies, the managers or bosses, they make the decisions and they might not be the best informed people. It highly depends on whether they actually specialize in this area. In a cooperative, you can have a democratic discussion and people can share their ideas and interests. And maybe you have different experts on different topics who can raise their voice and say, hey, wait a minute, I actually know quite a lot about this software because I used to work with it in my last job. And so everyone can bring in what they know, their ideas, their creativity, and their knowledge. So that's a big advantage in democratic companies. One argument against worker co-ops is the fear that discussions are too long. Now that can be a problem, but it highly depends on the methods of decision making and the methods of moderations. For example, if a worker co-op is organized in a decentralized way, where you have different task groups that are specialized on specific topics, then you don't have big group discussions. And finally, the biggest argument I find is that if someone always tells you what to do, it significantly lowers your motivation. Because if someone tells you, please do this, please do that, then your motivation is extrinsic. Whereas organizational psychology shows that intrinsic motivation is much stronger. So if people do what they actually want to do and what they feel makes sense doing, then they are much more motivated and much more productive. Some people say, ooh, worker cooperatives, but if there's no pressure, then people are just going to be lazy and they're not going to be productive. And that's not true. There's a lot of theory and a lot of studies that show how strong intrinsic motivation is, and that people who really do what they really want to do, this kind of new work theory, to work what you really, really want to work, makes people much more productive, much more motivated. So in a normal hierarchical company, people tell me what to do. They give the task and I can't choose, or maybe I can choose between tasks A or B, but I can't say, but today I would like to do something completely different. In a democratic worker co-op, in a self-organized environment, people can choose and say, hey, I would really try to learn new tasks. Until now, I've been doing finances, but I really would like to do a little bit more web design, because until now that has been my hobby and I would like to bring it into the company. So in self-organized companies, again, people can bring in their whole range of abilities and qualifications and ideas, whereas in a hierarchical environment, people are much more regulated and limited in the things that they can bring into the company. Another argument against worker co-ops is that people think someone needs to feel in charge the way that only an owner does, so that you need private property so that the company works. This assumes that anyone who's not an owner is not motivated to work for the company. But in most privately owned companies, you have very few owners. Maybe you have only one owner, or the owner is a stock company, which is publicly traded, and the people who own the company don't actually know the people who work there, so they don't actually have anything to do with everyday work. And all the rest of the people, they're only employed and they don't own the company. If we think that only the owners are actually motivated to work and to be productive, that means that anyone who's only employed is not really motivated to work at all. And that's a strong argument for worker co-ops, because in worker cooperatives, everyone who works there owns the company. So they have the feeling that it's their company, and that makes them much more motivated to actually spend at least some of their lifetime in the company and work. Okay, so this was to show that worker cooperatives and democracy in companies can work from an economical point of view. From a political point of view, there are a lot of other advantages of worker co-ops, making people more comfortable, learning how democracy works at a day-to-day, small-scale level, providing good working conditions. But these are more the political aspects. But also from an economical point of view, worker co-ops can actually work very well, and they might even work better than normal hierarchical companies.